Well, welcome back, everybody. If we could take our seats as the rest file their way in. Thanks for hanging with us for part 2 of our day's event. So we've talked about Veterans Affairs. We've had the legislators who oversee Veterans Affairs. Now we get somebody from the Veterans Affairs world. We'll have a nice duo coming up. Why don't you guys come take your seat? We have Danny Pummill, who's Principal Deputy Undersecretary for Benefits at the Veterans Benefits Administration, and moderating is Kellie Lunney, who's our Senior Correspondent from Government Executive. Government Executive is our sister organization. We actually spun off from Gov Executive. They had a nice defense audience, part of the Gov Exec Media Group with our other sister brand, NextGov, which covers federal IT. So be sure to check out all those wonderful brands of the Atlantic Media Company. But I'll leave it to this duo to set us off on their panel. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kevin. Can everybody hear me okay? So we are going to talk about veterans benefits and the Veterans Benefits Administration. The agency in the VA, which has the Herculean task of providing a range of benefits, including disability compensation, pension benefits, life insurance loans, educational assistance to generations of veterans and their families. The agency pays out more than $94 billion each year to vets and their beneficiaries. $94 billion. That's more than some agencies' budgets. They employ over 21,000 workers, 53% of whom are veterans themselves. And over the last 5 years, VBA in particular has undergone a dramatic transformation, moving from a paper-based claims process to an electronic one, shrinking a massive backlog of disability claims, and trying to adapt to a new generation of veterans who have different needs and expectations than previous generations. The agency has made some real progress, but making sure veterans are educated about their benefits and receive them as quickly as possible remain challenges, and probably always will be to some degree. Too many vets are frustrated and put off by a bureaucratic system that too often does not serve them or their families. We've all heard the stories of vets waiting an unconscionable amount of time for benefits, of employees who've cooked the books, of managers who have retaliated against employees for speaking out about misconduct in the workplace. Why are these things happening, especially at a place that employs so many veterans and where there are so many dedicated employees and managers? How can the VA build on its successes and work on improving service and outreach to vets and their families going forward? Hopefully our guest, Danny Pummill, the Principal Deputy Undersecretary for Benefits at the VBA, can help answer some of these questions today. Mr. Pummill is the second in command at VBA, helping to run an agency with 56 regional processing centers across the country. His expertise is in the area of human resources and compensation and pension services. He has a long and distinguished career in government management. He's been with the VA since 2010. Before that, he was at the Army Department. He is also a veteran, having retired as a colonel from the Army after 33 years of service. Thank you, Mr. Pummill, for being here. I want to start off talking about the disability claims backlog. The disability compensation claims backlog is at an all-time low. Since VA started keeping track about 8 years ago, it's now it's under 100,000 claims, around between 70 and 80,000, after peaking to more than 600,000 back in March of 2013. The goal that the agency set was to eliminate the backlog by the end of fiscal 2015, which is tomorrow. So is that going to happen?
The answer is no. As of this morning, we're 74,000 claims in the backlog. That's down from 611,000 claims. And our goal all along was to eliminate the backlog. And the backlog is any claim that's over 125 days, because we felt that 125 days is long enough for a veteran to wait. And then, of course, the follow-on question is, well, is 125 days right? No, it's not right. We should be able to do claims. We got to figure out somehow to use the technology, use the mind power, use the expertise that's out there in America today to figure out how to get claims down to about 30 days. But we're not even close to that right now. The reason I say we won't hit zero by tomorrow is because we're never, ever going to have zero claims under any amount of days in the VA. There are certain claims that we're always going to have that are going to be so complex, so intricate, or a veteran will be hard-pressed to find his or her records. That's something else we can talk about, is why don't we have records for all of our veterans, and why are veterans searching all over the place to try to find something that the federal government's supposed to have? But it happens every day. Every day, I literally get 10, 20 calls a day from veterans who, Vietnam-era veterans, World War II veterans, even current-era veterans that can't find their file anyplace. It's not with DOD, it's not with the VA, and we spend a lot of time tracking down the file.
So how does that work? If you're getting calls from veterans who say, you know, I can't find my records, there's a disconnect between DOD and the VA, what do you do?
Well, first of all, we go to the record centers to try to find the records. We go back to DOD. We'll even call military hospitals. We'll ask the young man or woman, or older man or woman, you know, where did you serve? What hospitals were you at? And we'll try to go to those military hospitals and actually find the records. We'll go to their civilian doctors, see if the civilian doctor might have some of their military records. And in some cases, we have to ask them, can you give us a buddy statement? Which is, let's find somebody who served with this individual, who was present when the incident happened. Because in order to pay somebody compensation or give them benefits in the VA, we have to identify a disease, an injury, or an illness. And then we have to find where that disease, injury, or illness occurred on a period of active duty, and then the nexus between the two. So if we can find a buddy or a witness that was present,
Right.
that helps a lot.
Well, I mean, that's a complicated process. And
That's why we'll never be at zero. There's
is
always
there
gonna
a target that's above zero that I know that the rhetoric is eliminating the
be-
backlog.
the target is
but-
to be as close to zero as we possibly can.
At any
But
given
we're
time.
not going to give up. We're going to continue to, like I said, we're at 74,000 today. We were 76,000 Friday last week, 80,000 the week before. We'll continue to drive it down.
I know everybody has been talking about possible government shutdown. It looks like that's not going to happen this time around, but it very well could happen in December. How does something like that impact your ability to shrink that backlog, given the fact that you do pay overtime to employees who work on it?
A government shutdown is devastating to veterans, not just from the perspective of a backlog, but from everything we do. While medical and claims are considered priorities, we have to give the veterans their checks.
And much of the VA does stay open during a government shutdown.
Yeah, but unfortunately, the people that are behind the scenes that support them do not stay. So, yeah, we would issue checks, we would do medical for people, we would do procedures and things like that, but we wouldn't start any new things, and that would just start building the backlog
Yeah.
again. We hope that there's not a government shutdown, that the government keeps moving forward for veterans' sakes.
I know that in November, I think on Veterans Day, the agency is rolling out vets.gov,
Yes.
which is a website aimed at streamlining and consolidating various websites within the VA to help veterans access and educate themselves about their benefits. Can you tell us a little bit about that rollout and what veterans can expect?
Certainly. Actually, they talked a little bit about it or alluded to it in the last panel. The veterans of today don't want to have to go to 100, 200, 300 different websites or sources to try to find out the information they need. They want to go to one place. So the vets.gov is our first attempt at bringing everything together in one location. So veterans on Veterans Day will have one place to go and be able to find all the information there. Is it going to work perfectly on the first day? Probably not. It is a step in the right direction. It's something we should have done a long time ago. One of the good things about Secretary McDonald coming in is he's driving us to be more veteran-centric. He's driving us to be more people-centric inside the VA. The gentleman from IBM that was on the last panel talked about the veteran experience and the employee experience. Today, Secretary McDonald, his staff, all the hospital directors and all the regional office directors that do claims from the entire country are out in Leesburg, Virginia at the National Conference Center, and they're having a 3-day seminar on how to be more veteran-friendly, how to work with veterans to allow veterans to come to you. We've had a stigma for years that we were unapproachable. Well, it wasn't a stigma, it was true. You couldn't call the person who was doing your claim. You could.
Can they do that now?
Yes, they can. And they can actually call me, they can call my boss, they can call the secretary of the VA. I probably field 500 emails a day now from veterans because I give out my card all over the country. And this is the first federal agency I've ever worked for, and I've been doing this for 42 years, where one of our constituents can call us directly and for the first time in history, they're going to get an answer for us. I'm going to respond to that veteran. It may not be the answer that he or she wants, but I'm going to respond to him. I'm going to respond to him as quickly as I can. I'm going to say, I got your message. I know you're out there. I know you're hurting, and here's what I'm going to do to try to help you. And then I have a staff that starts working on those. One of the problems we have is everybody in the staff says, hey, you got to quit doing this. This is killing us because this is way too many veterans. But you know what? We'll stop doing it when we stop having problems with veterans, because we still run into issues every day where veterans need that extra help, and they didn't have anybody before they could actually reach out to.
You raise an interesting point about employees and, some of the pressure that they feel to do their jobs well. I think most people do want to do their jobs well. There are people who aren't interested in it, but I think that group is a lot smaller. But, I think in terms of claims processing, there are people who aren't trained as well. And if they are trained, they're getting competing guidance or directives from management, and it's frustrating to them, and they run into problems doing their job correctly. How is VBA in particular tackling that issue right now?
A great question. If you had asked me that question 3 years ago, I would have told you we're not. It's a mess. We would hire people in our claims process, and this is what Chairman Miller was talking about, where he talked about the culture of the VA. He's absolutely right. I agree with him 100%. There's a culture in the VA that needs to be changed, and we're slowly changing it. It's a huge government bureaucracy. We got to figure out how to make it change a little bit faster. What we did was we would hire claims people. We have 56 regional offices in the United States and overseas. The person would come in and that regional office would train the person how to be a claims person. Well, the problem is they get trained in how that regional office did it.
Right.
So the person who's an expert may have been an expert in PTSD, so they get really good at PTSD, where someplace else they're really good at cardiology or orthopedics or something. We ended that 2 years ago. We now bring in, when we hire new people, we bring them all into a central location. It's usually to Baltimore, downtown Baltimore. We have a training center, and we train them as a cadre, as a class. So they're all trained together as a class. Then after they graduate, it's a 6-week course. Then they leave that course, they go back to their regional office. They have another 6 weeks of training before they can start doing claims, and then we bring them back periodically. We basically stole a page from the military, where we create cadres of people. They go together, they can feed off of each other, and there's no more you're caught with this regional flavor. Mm-hmm. And we're finding out that it's now filtering down to the ROs, and we're increasing our other training we're opening up a training center in Denver now to make it easier to fly to instead of just on one coast. So we'll have 2 training centers, one in Baltimore, one in Denver. Okay. And we're going to start running our senior people through groups, bring them back together, get them on the whole concept, not their individual ROs, and understand that all veterans need to be treated the same, that the training's got to be the same.
And are they trained to sort of be generalists in terms of claim processing, or do they have specific expertise?
We train everybody that comes in to be a generalist in claims, but we know that there are some claims that a generalist can't do. It takes a very senior claims person with a lot of experience to do PTSD, to do certain Agent Orange, military sexual trauma. A person can't do military sexual trauma unless they've got a lot of experience, because military sexual trauma is not just looking for if you have an orthopedic injury and you jumped out of an airplane, that's pretty easy to get the nexus between the airplane drop and the knee. But if you look at a person's record for military sexual trauma, most cases people didn't report it. It was the silent crime. They didn't come forward for a lot of reasons. Most of it still, I believe, today goes unreported. So we have people that are trained to look through the files, and they look for things that we call markers. Was there a change in behavior? Did the person start coming in late for work? Did they start using drugs? Did they get in trouble talking back at work? We look for those things in the file around the time frame that the military sexual trauma would have occurred, and based on those markers, we can approve the military sexual trauma.
And you're doing reevaluations of those MST claims that have been previously denied, is that right? All of them?
Yes.
How much is that contributing to the backlog? Do you know if that's a significant part of it, or?
everything we do adds to the backlog, but there's some things that you can't not do.
Right, right.
So it's, for instance, they're looking at the Blue Water Navy in Vietnam right now. They're looking at Camp Lejeune. Somebody talked about burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan. The senator talked about mustard gas in Iraq and Afghanistan. As those come forward, we'll take them, we'll add them to our pile. And it's not conceivable to go back to the taxpayers and say, well, you know what, we just got this new presumptive, we need to hire 2,000 people. Well, we can't do that. It takes us, from the time we hire a person to the time they become a very efficient, solid claims person, it takes about 18 months. So when something new comes up, you just got to add it to the plate, and you just got to do the best you can. If it's a long-term thing, you would hire additional people, but normally you just have to work your way through the backlog.
Going back to the question of employees and feeling pressure, and I want to get to the idea of whistleblowing. I think we've heard a lot of disturbing stories over the past year about employees who are whistleblowers at various VA facilities, ranging from abusive work environments to some of their fears of getting fired for not processing claims fast enough. VA employees have filed a stunning 35% of the 4,000 prohibited personnel practices the government has received so far in 2015. That surpasses the rate of the Defense Department. That's a big deal. With all the protections afforded to whistleblowers and the Secretary's commitment to rooting out a culture that condones misconduct and retaliation against whistleblowers, why is this still happening? I realize it takes a long time to change a culture, but we still keep hearing stories and issues.
I think the reason that we have so many whistleblowers, and I think that's a good thing, is because of all the publicity and all the pressure on us. In order to change the culture of the VA, we're not going to change it ourselves. It's going to take legislator. And I think I applaud Chairman Miller and his committee. I mean, they're on us big time.
Oh yeah, they are.
They're every day. Look at this. What are you doing here? That's a good thing. It forces us to do things, and I think that's how the government's supposed to work. That's Congress's role. They're supposed to make us do stuff. I have a lot of sleepless nights, but I understand he's doing exactly what he should do. But then we need our employees, we need our veteran service organizations, we need contractors that are working with us. All that's got to pull together to change the culture. Because we got so much pressure put on us and so much spotlight about whistleblowers and problems in the VA, people in the VA now feel confident that they can come forward and they can make their complaint, and we're going to act on that complaint. My boss, Allison Hickey, has a open telephone line and an open line on her computer where whistleblowers can come to her, and she actually deals with them one-on-one every day to get information and try to work with them. As long as they feel free to do this and they're open, we're probably going to get more and more and more and more. At some point, it'll reach a level point where the rank and file feels comfortable that we're listening to them, that we're making the changes that they want. Then you'll start seeing them dropping off. I hope that someday the rest of the federal government does the same thing.
I think that when you look at morale, though, and you see the fact that a lot of managers are not punished for bad behavior or retaliation. They are just reassigned, detailed to another facility. I mean, that, you see something like that and you think, what's the point? And why am I here, and why am I trying to do a good job?
I can only speak for VBA, our side of the house. I don't know of an incident in VBA, and I've been in my job for 2 years, where a manager has retaliated against somebody that brought something to their attention, and that person got in trouble in VBA. I can't speak for all the rest of VA because I just don't know. I can tell you that some of our most prominent whistleblowers, we have moved them to other locations. We helped them get other jobs. We have brought them back to the rank and file and said, here's what was brought to us, and here's how we can make the organization better. We're trying to applaud what they're doing, recognize what they're doing, using it as turn the lemons into lemonade, make it into something good. It's hard. We still get the ones where we have complaints that aren't real complaints. But for the most part, if somebody's going to put themselves out there and come to the secretary or my level and say, we have this serious problem, there's usually a problem, because that's a pretty tough thing to do. It takes a lot of courage.
Right,
yeah.
even if it's just a problem of perception, it's
Yes,
still a
yes,
problem.
absolutely.
Shifting gears a little bit back to the veteran, the post 9/11 veterans are different than other generations for a lot of reasons. They're younger, they're less likely to be married. Obviously, there's a large percentage of female veterans now. It's a much more racially diverse group than previous generations. They're also much more likely to live in poverty than other veterans, have service-connected disability, and rely solely on VA healthcare. How has VBA adjusted to dealing with this new cohort of younger veterans with different needs and expectations than vets from previous generations? How are they different in their needs? How are they similar? And how is VBA kind of evolving to respond to them?
Veterans from different eras are completely different. How they approach VA, how they apply for their benefits, the type of benefits they apply for, how they use the services, how they avail themselves of online, in person, things like that. They're not even close to being the same. It took us a while to figure out the wants, the needs, and how to serve the current era veterans. I don't think we have it completely right yet. I think we're doing a much better job in VBA, and I give a lot of the credit to my boss, Allison Hickey, with women veterans. She is a woman veteran, Air Force veteran, and that's one of her passions, so we charge ahead in that area. One of the things I worry about is every once in a while somebody will ask me, do you think too many veterans are claiming PTSD? And my answer would be, I don't think enough veterans are claiming PTSD. Most of my close friends, because of my background, in the military, are veterans. Most of my friends have PTSD. Some of them admitted it. Most of them don't admit it. I try to get them to come forward and at least claim it. I want them to get some kind of help. I want them to talk to somebody.
Is it because it's still taboo among that generation?
It is. There's still a stigma. It's going to take groups like the ones that are presenting here today, Iraq, Afghanistan Veterans of America. I think they got it. They got the ear of the young veterans. They're convincing the young veterans that they've got to come forward. They've got to talk to somebody. I think the Marine group that got together, where they have their own little Google site and they're talking to each other, is a step in the right direction. But I think that they need additional help. Professionals got to get in there. I wish every veteran that processed out of the military would at least go through some kind of initial screening. I don't know how they would do something like that. I think that is something about the current vets that somebody needs to do, somebody needs to pay more attention to. We're trying very, very hard in VA, but we're not getting them all to come to us. We got to figure out how to break that. Yeah.
Do you think that when Secretary McDonald leaves, he will leave at some point? Not sure when that will happen. The next administration could potentially ask him to stay on for a bit. Do you think his reforms, his approach, his philosophies are they sustainable? At least as far as your job is concerned, VBA is concerned.
There's always a fear in the federal government that the rank and file is just waiting out the leadership, waiting out the boss. And
that is true.
Yeah, and it happens every day. That's part of our culture in VA. It's part of the federal government culture. Because these people are just coming through. I think some of the things that Secretary McDonald has done are so right. This veteran engagement, where we're now for the first time, I would have never thought 3 years ago that veterans would be contacting me directly on my email or on my telephone.
I bet you didn't.
When I first came to VA, they told me, when you travel around the country, make sure you don't go into the VSO organizations, like an AMVET club or a VFW or DAV or something like that, because they really don't like the VA. I said, you got to be kidding me. We're the VA. How can you not do that? Well, I did it anyway. And now we're at the point where when I travel around, I'll go into a veterans club, or I'll meet with a group of veterans. I go on campus and meet with student veterans and pass out my card. And the first thing is, if I'm in a club, You know, you go in there and you say, hey, can I have a drink? And they said, well, are you a veteran? Yeah, I'm a veteran. I show them my retire ID card. They say, okay. And then the music's playing and you're having a beer. And then somebody says, where do you work? And you say, well, Washington, D.C. Well, the music goes down a little bit. And the
You lost the
conversation
record.
comes on. They go, well, who do you work for in Washington, D.C.? Well, I work for the Veterans Administration. The music goes off. The beers get pushed away. And then everybody converges on you because they're upset and they have complaints. But if you start listening to them, most of their complaints are because nobody's listening to them. Nobody is taking the time to explain to them what they have to do. Nobody's helping them getting their benefits and services. Nobody's helping them get into the VA hospitals. Nobody's taking the time just to explain that to them. My goal is to get the music back on and get somebody to buy me a beer before the night's over. and I've been pretty successful, but you know, on a larger scale, that's what our Secretary Bob McDonnell is doing is you got to engage with veterans. They're your customers. You know, how can you be in a customer service organization if your customers can't contact you? I think that part will carry on. That will go forward. The MyVA. Everything else, well, we'll just have to let history, you know, take its course and see what happens. But human nature says some will make it, some won't. I'm not good at predicting what will and won't. Yeah.
Well, I think we all can agree that change is afoot and something will be different at some point. I think we'd like to take some questions from the audience if they have any.
Got some cards here. Now you got
you.
my cards, right? No.
Oh, these are,
Wow.
okay. Okay. We have a wave of Vietnam-era vets who need care due to the effects of age in general, as well as injuries. And the VA is being overwhelmed with post-9/11 veterans. What is being done with the VA to handle both generations simultaneously? In other words, the VA will likely be criticized for prioritizing, not privatizing, one group over the other. And post-9/11 vets might be more aware of their benefits than others. We talked a little bit about this, but I think it's a good question in terms of you don't want one group to feel left out or a greater priority than the other.
It's a good question, but the person who asked the question, you got a little bit of wrong information. A lot of the backlog that we have right now in VBA is because of the Vietnam-era veterans. The Vietnam-era veterans, because of their age, are filing claims at an unprecedented rate, and that's a good thing. What we would have preferred is that they would have filed their claims when they got out of the military, so they could have been getting treatment and services for all the years.
Right.
But that era, those veterans, and I am one, I'm that era, mistrust the government. They don't want to talk to government employees. They don't want to be involved with the government. They don't want to get services from the government. And now they're doing it because they absolutely have to, because they're in that need. And it would have been better if we could have spread it over time. The Iraq-Afghanistan veterans, they are smart, they're sophisticated, and they understand their benefits. When they apply for benefits, it used to be that veterans would only apply for about 4 conditions. An Iraq-Afghanistan veteran applies for an average of 19 conditions because they understand what the rules are and they understand how to apply for it. That's a good thing because once again, if they apply for it now, we'll be able to take care of them over their entire life. What's not good is the Iraq-Afghanistan veterans are doing just like the Vietnam veterans. They're not applying for the benefits and the numbers that you would think they were. We, the VA, were not prepared for the onslaught of the Vietnam veterans. And the Vietnam War was 50 years ago. We are not going to be prepared for the onslaught of the Iraq and Afghanistan veterans if we don't start thinking right now what's going to happen when this cohort of veterans turns 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. And you know what? They're going to live longer and they're going to have more needs. You said we're paying out $92 billion in benefits right now. It's going to be a lot higher when we have to start paying for the Iraq-Afghanistan veterans. How do we now get ready for that? And how do we convince veterans now? One of the greatest things that happened, and Iraq-Afghanistan Veterans of America had a play in it, was the new transition program, the VAL-VEI Act, where every service member that leaves the military is getting more information on transition. That needs to be more in-depth and more detailed. I would like every veteran that leaves to file a claim, to list everything that's wrong with them now. even though they may not have the disease, the injury, or illness, if they list all the accident, injuries, and everything they had, I will have a record of that. And then when they come back to me, I don't have to worry about losing their record. I've already got it on file. I can just approve their claim based on what they have.
Are they being encouraged to do that?
No, they're not. They're not. And they need to be. As a federal employee, I can't encourage people to file claims.
Right.
But the Veteran Service Organizations certainly can, and friends and family members of veterans certainly can. More importantly than being able to prove their claim in the future, think of the database we would have. Instead of treating stuff like, the burn pits, if a group of veterans come to us 30 years from now and they have some kind of new cancer or new disease, and we look at our database and we see they all served in the same area in Fallujah in the same time period, 2004, 2005, then we can contact all the veterans that served there and said, hey, your partners came out with this disease, you need to get into the VA hospital or your local hospital right away, get checked and see if you can have it, so we can pre-treat and prevent instead of having to do the medicine after the fact when they get really sick or really ill.
Well, thank you for addressing that. I think that's all we have time for at this point. Thank you for being such an attentive audience. Thank you, Danny,
Thank
for
you, everybody.
answering all those questions.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.